Tasha Williams sat on her small apartment couch, staring at the cream-colored envelope in her hands. The fancy gold lettering made her stomach twist. 5 years had passed since she last spoke to her father, yet here was his wedding invitation, appearing like nothing had ever gone wrong between them. Unbelievable, she whispered, running her finger over the raised text. At 19, Tasha had built a life without him. After he walked out on her mother for another woman, she had locked away that part of her heart. The pain was still there, buried under layers of determination and independence. She had her college studies, a part-time job at the campus library, and friends who had become her chosen family. She almost threw the invitation into the trash. Her finger was on the edge of the envelope, ready to tear it in half, when a detail caught her eye. The bride's name, Vanessa Morgan. Something about it tugged at her memory. Tasha placed the invitation on her coffee table and opened her laptop. The name bothered her like a song she couldn't quite remember. She typed Vanessa Morgan into the search bar and scrolled through the results, nothing standing out at first. Then she tried Vanessa Morgan fraud on a hunch, and her screen filled with interesting links. No way, Tasha whispered, clicking on a news article from 8 months ago. The article mentioned a Vanessa Morgan who had been questioned about identity theft in a nearby state. The case had been dropped for lack of evidence, but the details were troubling. Tasha found herself going deeper, searching through public records and social media profiles. 3 hours later, her small coffee table was covered with notes. The woman her father planned to marry might not even be named Vanessa Morgan. Tasha found at least 2 other names connected to the same face in different social media accounts. In one profile, the woman claimed to be from Seattle. In another, she said she grew up in Florida. Tasha's roommate came home to find her still hunched over her laptop. "Hey, what's with all this?" Maya asked, picking up a page of scribbled notes. "My dad's getting married," Tasha replied without looking up. "And you're happy about this?" Maya questioned, seeing the intensity on her friend's face. Tasha finally looked up, her eyes serious. "I think my dad is being tricked. This woman he's marrying, something's not right about her." "Are you sure you're not just upset about him moving on?" Maya asked gently. Tasha shook her head and pointed to her screen. "Look at these pictures. Same woman, different names, different stories. And this court case, she was investigated for stealing someone's identity last year." Maya sat down beside her, now concerned. "So what are you going to do?" Tasha stared at the wedding invitation. The ceremony was only 2 weeks away. Her father hadn't been part of her life for years, but she couldn't just let him walk into what might be a dangerous trap. "I need to find out more," she said firmly. "If I'm going to crash his wedding and accuse his bride of being a criminal, I need real proof." She picked up her phone and scrolled to a number she hadn't called in years. Her father's best friend, Uncle James, who had always kept in touch even after the divorce. "Time to call in some help," she muttered as she pressed the call button. The phone rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered. "Uncle James, it's Tasha. We need to talk about Dad's wedding. I think he's in trouble." As night fell outside her window, Tasha Williams set aside thoughts of exams and work. A new mission had taken over, saving her father from a woman who might be planning to destroy his life. Uncle James met Tasha at a small coffee shop downtown the next morning. His worried eyes told her he had taken her concerns seriously. "I always thought something was off about her," he admitted, stirring his coffee slowly. "Your dad met her at some charity event. Within 2 months, she had moved into his house. It happened so fast." Tasha nodded, pulling out her notebook. "I need to know everything about her. Where she works, who her friends are, what she talks about." James leaned forward. "She claims to work in art sales. High-end stuff. Always on calls with important clients but never mentions names. And she has no local friends. Says all her people are in Europe or California." For the next 3 days, Tasha skipped classes and called in sick to work. Her small apartment became a research center, walls covered with notes and printouts. Uncle James brought over photos he had secretly taken at family gatherings, which Tasha used for more detailed searches. The breakthrough came when she found a small news item from a town in Arizona. A wealthy retired doctor had married a woman named Victoria Mills. 6 months later, his bank accounts were emptied, and Victoria disappeared. The grainy newspaper photo showed a familiar face, Vanessa Morgan, with darker hair and different makeup. Got you, Tasha whispered, hands shaking as she printed the article. That evening, she drove to the public library 2 towns over where records were kept. Using her student ID, she gained access to archived newspapers. Working through the night, she discovered 3 more cases, different names, different states, but the same pattern. Wealthy men, quick marriages, missing money, vanished bride. By dawn, Tasha had built a solid case. The woman calling herself Vanessa Morgan had been operating for at least 8 years. She was smart, always changed her appearance enough to avoid easy identification, never stayed in one place long enough for charges to stick. Back in her apartment, Tasha collapsed on her bed, exhausted but unable to sleep. Her phone rang. Uncle James. Your father announced yesterday that they're changing the wedding venue, he said, his voice tight with worry. It's been moved up to this Saturday. Smaller ceremony, just close friends. Tasha sat up, suddenly alert. She's rushing it. Something spooked her. What do we do? James asked. I need to show Dad what I found, tonight. That evening, Tasha drove to her childhood home, a place she hadn't visited since her father had asked her mother to leave. The large house looked the same but felt different. Uncle James met her at the corner, handing her a house key. He's in his study. Vanessa went out shopping. Should be gone another hour. With shaking hands, Tasha unlocked the door. Walking through the familiar hallway felt like stepping back in time. Pictures of her had been removed. Now only photos of her father and Vanessa decorated the walls. She found him at his desk, glasses perched on his nose, reviewing papers. Tasha? He looked up, shocked. What are you doing here? Dad, I need to talk to you about Vanessa. She placed her folder on his desk. She's not who you think she is. His face hardened. James let you in, didn't he? I told him to stay out of this. Just look at what I found, Tasha pleaded, opening the folder. This woman has married at least 4 other men. Each time, she emptied their accounts and disappeared. Her father stood up, his face flushed with anger. I don't know what game you're playing, but I won't listen to these lies. You never approved of anyone after your mother. Dad, please. No, I'm happy for the first time in years. If you can't accept that, then leave. He pointed to the door. Now. Tasha stood her ground, tears filling her eyes. She's going to hurt you. The only person hurting me right now is you. He gathered her papers and thrust them back at her. Get out of my house. As the door slammed behind her, Tasha knew she had only one option left. If her father wouldn't listen, she would have to stop the wedding herself, even if it meant he would never forgive her. Tasha sat in her car outside her father's house, tears streaming down her face. Her hands gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. The folder of evidence lay scattered on the passenger seat, rejected by the one person who needed to see it most. It didn't work, she told Uncle James over the phone. You wouldn't even look at the evidence. I was afraid of that, James sighed. That woman has him completely under her spell. Tasha wiped her eyes with her sleeve. The wedding is in 3 days. We need a new plan. The next morning, Tasha skipped her classes again and drove to the local police station. She had organized her evidence into a clear timeline, with photos and newspaper clippings neatly arranged. Surely the police would take this seriously. Officer Martinez listened patiently as Tasha explained her findings. He reviewed the folder carefully, nodding as she pointed out the pattern of fraud across different states. This is impressive research, Miss Williams, he said finally. But I have to be honest with you, without direct evidence of a crime committed in our jurisdiction, there's not much we can do right now. But she's about to marry my father. She'll take everything he has. Tasha's voice rose in frustration. Officer Martinez leaned forward. I understand your concern. I can look into her background, but getting a formal investigation started takes time. Probably more time than we have before this wedding. Tasha left the police station feeling defeated. 3 separate officials had given her the same answer. They needed more time, more evidence, more proof of immediate criminal activity. That evening, she met with Uncle James at a small diner near her apartment. The place was nearly empty, which was perfect for their conversation. The police won't help in time, she told them, pushing her untouched food around the plate. And Dad won't listen. James nodded grimly. I tried talking to him again today. He accused me of being jealous of his happiness. What about his lawyer? Mr. Peterson has been Dad's attorney for years. Maybe he could help? Already tried, James replied. Vanessa convinced your father to switch to her friend's law firm last month. Peterson can't access any of his files anymore. Tasha slumped in her seat. Every door seemed to be closing. As she stared out the window, she noticed a young couple walking by, the woman filming something on her phone for social media. Suddenly, an idea sparked in her mind. What if we don't need the police right away? She said slowly. What if we just need to expose her in front of everyone? James looked confused. What do you mean? The wedding. Everyone important to Dad will be there. His business partners, friends, community leaders. Tasha's words came faster now. If I show up with all this evidence and present it to everyone there, she won't be able to hide. James looked nervous. That's risky, Tasha. Your father will be furious. He already is, she replied, a new determination in her voice. But I'd rather have him angry at me than destroyed by her. The next day, Tasha and Uncle James prepared their plan. James, as a wedding guest, would ensure Tasha could get inside. She would wait for the right moment, just before the vows, to make her move. That night, Tasha could barely sleep. She kept seeing her father's face, angry and disappointed. Was she doing the right thing? What if she was wrong about Vanessa? What if this destroyed her last chance to ever reconnect with her father? At dawn, she sat on her bed looking at an old family photo, her mother, father, and herself at the beach, all smiling. It was taken before everything fell apart. I'm sorry, Dad, she whispered to the picture, but I have to do this, even if you never speak to me again. She carefully placed the photo back on her nightstand and began preparing for the most difficult day of her life, the day she would publicly crash her father's wedding and expose the woman he loved as a criminal. The day before the wedding arrived with gloomy skies and light rain. Tasha parked her car half a block from her father's house, hood pulled up to hide her face. The modest suburban home she grew up in had transformed overnight. Workers unloaded chairs, tables, and fancy decorations from rental trucks. A large white tent was being set up in the backyard. Florists carried in arrangements that must have cost thousands. Everything looked expensive and rushed. This isn't like Dad at all, Tasha whispered to herself. Her father had always been careful with money, building his accounting business through years of hard work. Extravagant spending was Vanessa's influence, she was sure of it. Uncle James texted her. She's convinced him to have the ceremony at home. Easier to control who comes in. Tasha watched as a catering van pulled up, followed by a wine delivery truck. The wedding had been moved up and changed to a home venue with almost no notice. Everything was happening too fast. As afternoon faded into evening, Tasha drove to Mrs. Collins' house. The older woman had been her family's housekeeper for 15 years, and even after the divorce, she continued working for Tasha's father 2 days a week. It's madness in that house, Mrs. Collins said, serving Tasha hot tea at her kitchen table. That woman is ordering everyone around like a general. Your father just smiles and signs checks. Have you noticed anything strange? Anything missing? Tasha asked. Mrs. Collins leaned forward, lowering her voice even though they were alone. Last week, I was cleaning his office. His safe was open. I've known the combination for years, for emergencies, he said. But when I glanced inside, it was nearly empty. Tasha's heart raced. What's usually in there? Important papers. His will, property deeds, emergency cash. Mrs. Collins shook her head. When I mentioned it to him, he said Vanessa suggested moving everything to a bank vault for better security. But why before the wedding, not after? Because she's planning something, Tasha said quietly. Did you notice anything else? Mrs. Collins thought for a moment. 2 strange men came by yesterday. They spoke with Vanessa privately in the garden. Your father wasn't home. They looked not like wedding people, more like the type who might break into houses, if you know what I mean. Tasha's worry deepened. The pattern was clear now. Vanessa wasn't just rushing the wedding. She was preparing to clean out her father's accounts and disappear, possibly with help from these men. Mrs. Collins, would you do something for me? Tasha asked. The older woman nodded firmly. Anything for you, dear. Your mother was always good to me, and so was your father before. Well, before her. I need to know the exact schedule for tomorrow. What time everything happens, where people will be standing. And most importantly, where will the marriage certificate be signed? Mrs. Collins' eyes widened with understanding. You're going to stop it. I have to try, Tasha replied. Later that night, Tasha sat in her apartment preparing her evidence one final time. She had created a simple but powerful presentation on her tablet. Photos, newspaper clippings, court records, all showing Venus's pattern of deception across multiple states. Her phone buzzed with a text from Uncle James. Just left rehearsal dinner. She's nervous about something. Keeps checking her phone. Wedding scheduled for 2 p.m. sharp. Another text followed. Security guards hired for tomorrow. 2 at front door, 1 at back. Guest list being strictly checked. Tasha felt a cold knot in her stomach. Vanessa was creating a fortress around the wedding. Getting inside would be even harder than she thought. As midnight approached, she laid out her clothes for tomorrow, not the dress of a wedding guest, but simple dark pants and a blouse she could move quickly in if needed. She packed her tablet, a small recorder, and printouts of her most damning evidence. Tomorrow, it all ends, she whispered, setting her alarm for 6 a.m. one way or another. Sleep came fitfully, filled with dreams of her father's disappointed face and the sound of police sirens. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, a stark contrast to Tasha's dark mood. She dressed carefully in her simple outfit, adding a light jacket with deep pockets to hold her evidence and recorder. Her hands trembled slightly as she applied minimal makeup, just enough to look presentable but not enough to stand out. At noon, she parked 3 blocks away from her father's house and texted Uncle James. In position. How's it looking? His reply came quickly. Security checking names at both doors. Caterers and staff using side entrance. Vanessa nervous, snapping at everyone. Tasha took a deep breath. The side entrance was her best chance. She had known that house her entire childhood, every door, window, and creaky floorboard. At 1:15 p.m., she walked casually down the street, looking like any other person out for a stroll. When she reached the row of bushes along the side of her father's property, she slipped between them, crouching low. The catering van was parked by the kitchen door. Staff hurried in and out, carrying trays and last-minute items. Tasha watched their pattern, noting how the security guard barely glanced at the busy workers. A young server stepped out for a cigarette break, placing his service jacket on a chair. Tasha seized her opportunity. She darted forward, grabbed the jacket, and slipped it on over her clothes. Then she picked up an empty tray left near the door and walked confidently toward the house. Hey, we need those champagne flutes now, she called to the guard, who merely nodded and stepped aside. Inside, the house was transformed. Flowers and decorations filled every space. Guests in fancy clothes mingled in the living room while staff prepared for the ceremony in the backyard. Tasha kept her head down, moving through the kitchen where caterers were too busy to notice one more person in a server's jacket. She slipped into the hallway bathroom and texted Uncle James. I'm in. Where are they now? Bride getting ready upstairs. Your dad greeting guests in the garden. Ceremony starts in 30 minutes. Tasha removed the server's jacket and checked her appearance. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. Everything came down to timing now. At 1:55 p.m., she made her way to the garden, staying hidden behind a large group of guests. The chairs were arranged in neat rows, facing a flower-covered arch where her father would soon be married. Uncle James spotted her and gave a subtle nod from his seat in the second row. Music began playing. Guests took their seats. Tasha slipped behind a large decorative plant near the side of the arch. Her father appeared, looking handsome in his tuxedo but tense around his eyes. He took his position under the arch with the minister. The music changed, signaling the bride's entrance. Vanessa appeared at the back of the garden in a stunning white dress, her face partially hidden behind a delicate veil. As she began her walk down the aisle, Tasha noticed something alarming, a small suitcase partially hidden behind the catering tent. A quick escape bag ready to go. The minister began speaking. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today. Tasha's moment had arrived. She stepped out from behind the plant, walking calmly toward the center of the ceremony. I object to this marriage, she said clearly, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent garden. Guests gasped. Her father's face darkened with anger. Tasha, what are you doing here? Vanessa's eyes widened with recognition and fear. Security, she called. Remove her immediately. Two large men started moving toward Tasha, but she stood her ground, pulling out her tablet. Before you throw me out, she announced loudly, everyone should see who you're really marrying, Dad. She connected her tablet to the Bluetooth speakers set up for the ceremony. The garden sound system came to life, and recording began to play. Vanessa's voice, speaking clearly to someone on the phone. The old man has no idea. After the wedding, I'll have access to everything. 3 days max, then I'm gone. Silence fell over the garden. The recording continued playing through the speakers, Vanessa's voice crisp and clear for everyone to hear. I've done this 4 times before. These rich old men are all the same, lonely and desperate. This one was even easier because his daughter hasn't spoken to him in years. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Tasha's father stood frozen, his face draining of color as he stared at his bride. That's not me, Vanessa said quickly, her voice shaking. That's obviously fake. Someone is trying to ruin our special day. She turned to Tasha's father, grabbing his arm. Richard, you know I love you. Don't listen to these lies. But Tasha was just getting started. She tapped her tablet, and the garden's decorative screen, meant for showing wedding photos later, lit up with images. This is Vanessa Morgan, Tasha announced, pointing to a photo of the bride. And this is Victoria Mills. Another photo appeared, showing the same woman with darker hair. And this is Valerie Matthews. A third photo, same woman, different style. Each time, she married wealthy men. Each time, their bank accounts were emptied within weeks. The security guards looked uncertainly between Vanessa and Tasha's father, waiting for instructions. Show these people out, Vanessa commanded, her calm facade cracking. This is ridiculous. But the guests were now fully engaged, murmuring and pointing. Uncle James stood up. Let her finish, Richard, he said firmly. For once in your life, listen. Tasha continued, her voice growing stronger. 3 months ago, a man named Gerald Thompson reported his wife missing in Arizona. Her name was Vivian Thompson. She displayed another photo, Vanessa again, with red hair. Before she disappeared, their joint accounts were drained of nearly $2 million. I've never been to Arizona, Vanessa shouted, but her voice had risen to an unnatural pitch. Tasha walked closer to her father, tablet in hand. Dad, I know you don't want to believe this, but look at her reaction. Look at her eyes. She knows I'm telling the truth. Her father finally turned to Vanessa, really looking at her face. What he saw made him take a step back. Is this true? He asked quietly. Of course not. Vanessa laughed, but it sounded hollow. She's just a jealous child who can't stand to see you happy. That's when Mrs. Collins stepped forward from where she had been watching near the house. Mr. Williams, the housekeeper said firmly, I found this in her suitcase this morning while cleaning. She held up a small leather case. There are 5 different ID cards inside. 5 different names, and this. She pulled out a one-way plane ticket to Brazil, dated for tomorrow morning. The garden erupted in chaos. Vanessa lunged for Mrs. Collins, trying to grab the case, but the older woman stepped back quickly. Several guests stood up, blocking Vanessa's path to the exit. You don't understand, Vanessa said, her voice changing, becoming harder. You deserved this. All of them did. Tasha's father seemed to age 10 years in that moment. Who are you, really? Someone who saw an opportunity, Vanessa replied coldly. Just like you did when you left Tasha's mother for someone younger. We're not so different. One of the guests, a police officer who worked with Tasha's father on community projects, stepped forward. I think we need to continue this conversation at the station. Vanessa's eyes darted around, calculating her chances. Suddenly, she bolted toward the side gate. But Uncle James was faster, sliding in front of the exit with surprising speed for his age. Not this time, he said firmly. The police officer pulled out his phone, calling for backup. Ma'am, I strongly suggest you stay where you are. As several guests surrounded Vanessa to prevent her escape, Tasha approached her father. His face showed shock, betrayal, and a deep sadness. Dad, she said quietly, I'm sorry it had to happen this way. He looked at her, really seeing her for the first time in years. How did you know? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Because I still care about you, she replied simply. Even after everything. Within 15 minutes, the wedding garden was transformed into something resembling a crime scene. 2 police cars arrived with flashing lights, parking at the curb outside. Guests huddled in small groups, whispering and pointing as uniformed officers made their way through the decorated arch. Officer Martinez, the same officer who had listened to Tasha's concerns days earlier, led the team. His eyes widened slightly when he saw Tasha standing beside her father. "Miss Williams," he nodded. "Looks like your evidence was solid after all." "I tried to tell you," she said, not unkindly. The officer turned his attention to Vanessa, who stood rigidly near the wedding altar, still in her white dress but with her veil torn away in the commotion. She had stopped trying to run but now wore a cold, calculating expression. "Ma'am, we need to ask you some questions about your identity," Officer Martinez said. "We have reason to believe you may be connected to several open fraud cases across state lines." "My name is Vanessa Morgan," she insisted. "This is just a misunderstanding. That jealous girl is trying to ruin her father's happiness." Officer Martinez nodded to a female officer who approached with the leather case Mrs. Collins had found. "Then perhaps you can explain why you have identification for 5 different people, or why you have a plane ticket to leave the country tomorrow morning?" Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "I want a lawyer." "That can be arranged at the station," Officer Martinez replied calmly. As the officers prepared to escort Vanessa away, one of them received a call. The officer listened intently, his expression growing serious. He walked over to Officer Martinez and spoke quietly, but Tasha was close enough to hear. "Sir, we just got confirmation from Arizona. Her fingerprints matched those found in the Gerald Thompson case. His wife disappeared with $2 million. They found his car at the bottom of a lake last week." Officer Martinez's demeanor changed instantly. He motioned to the other officers, who moved quickly to surround Vanessa. "Vanessa Morgan, or whatever your real name is, you're under arrest not just for fraud, but as a person of interest in a possible homicide investigation." The guests gasped as an officer pulled out handcuffs. Vanessa's face contorted with rage as the reality of her situation became clear. "You stupid girl," she spat at Tasha. "I would have been gone by tomorrow. He would have never known what hit him." Tasha's father flinched at these words, the full impact of his narrow escape finally hitting him. "How many others?" he asked quietly. "How many men have you done this to?" Vanessa laughed bitterly as the officers secured the handcuffs around her wrists. "Enough to live very comfortably. Men like you are all the same, so desperate for a beautiful young woman that you never ask the right questions." As the officers began reading Vanessa her rights, she locked eyes with Tasha one last time. "You should thank me, you know. I was going to leave him alive, unlike the last one. He might have eventually forgiven you for abandoning him." Tasha's father stepped forward, his face pale but determined. "That's enough. Take her away, please." The wedding guests parted silently as the officers led Vanessa down what should have been her wedding aisle, now her path to a police car. Her white dress dragged in the dirt, the perfect symbol of the beautiful illusion that had just been shattered. Officer Martinez stayed behind to take statements. He approached Tasha and her father with a serious expression. "We'll need both of you to come to the station. There's a lot of paperwork, and we need detailed statements." He turned to Tasha. "Your research will be essential to connecting the dots between her various identities." As the guests began to leave in shocked silence, Uncle James organized a few friends to help dismantle the wedding decorations. Mrs. Collins quietly directed the catering staff to pack up the untouched food and champagne. In the middle of it all stood Tasha and her father, strangers who had been brought together by the most unusual circumstances. He looked at her with new eyes, seeing not the angry teenager who had refused to speak to him for years, but a determined young woman who had saved him from disaster. "Why did you do it?" he asked softly. "After everything?" Tasha met his gaze steadily. "Because no one deserves what she was planning. Not even you." 3 weeks after the wedding that never happened, Tasha sat nervously in a small coffee shop downtown. The bell above the door jingled, and she looked up to see her father walking in. He spotted her immediately and made his way to her table. "You're early," he said, sliding into the chair across from her. "Mom always said I was born 10 minutes ahead of schedule," Tasha replied with a small smile. It was their first meeting since that chaotic day, but they had spoken briefly on the phone twice. Richard Williams looked older than his 52 years. The lines around his eyes had deepened, and his hair seemed grayer than Tasha remembered. The events of the past month had taken their toll. "I ordered you black coffee," she said, pushing a cup toward him. "2 sugars, no cream. You still take it that way?" He looked surprised. "Yes, I'm amazed you remember." An awkward silence fell between them. 5 years of hurt and separation couldn't be erased in a moment. Tasha fidgeted with her napkin while her father stared into his coffee. "The police called yesterday," he finally said. "They confirmed Vanessa, or whatever her real name is, was involved in cases in 5 different states. The prosecutor says with all the evidence, she'll likely face at least 15 years. Tasha nodded. "Officer Martinez told me. They found 3 offshore accounts with almost $6 million. Money taken from her previous husbands, including $50,000 of mine," her father added quietly. "Money she convinced me to transfer just days before the wedding. For honeymoon preparations," she said. He shook his head. "I was such a fool." "Smart people make mistakes, Dad," Tasha said gently, "especially when their emotions are involved." He looked up at her, his eyes filled with regret. "Like when I left your mother? Was that a mistake made by a smart person too?" Tasha took a deep breath. This was the conversation they had never had, the wound that had never healed. "I didn't come to talk about Mom today," she said carefully. That's for another time." Her father nodded, accepting her boundary. "Fair enough, but I need to ask. Why did you do it, Tasha? Why go to such lengths for someone who hurt you so badly?" Tasha looked out the window for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "At first, I just wanted to confirm my suspicions. Then it became about justice, stopping a criminal." She turned back to face him. "But in the end, I guess it was simple. You're my dad, despite everything." Richard's eyes filled with tears. He reached across the table hesitantly, not quite touching her hand but leaving his own palm up in invitation. "I don't deserve a daughter like you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. Tasha looked at his outstretched hand. 5 years ago, she had sworn she would never forgive him. Now, she wasn't so sure. "Mrs. Collins told me you're selling the house," she said, changing the subject. He nodded. "Too many memories now. Both good and bad." After a pause, he added, "I found your old photo albums in the attic while packing, and some of your mother's things I kept. I thought maybe you might want them." "I would," Tasha said. Then, hesitantly, she placed her hand on top of his. "Maybe I could come by this weekend to look through them, if that's okay." The relief on his face was immediate and powerful. "Yes, please, anytime." As they finished their coffee, their conversation slowly became less strained. They carefully avoided the deepest hurts of the past, focusing instead on Tasha's studies and her father's plans to restart his life. When it was time to leave, they walked together to the door. Outside on the sidewalk, Richard turned to his daughter. "Tasha, I know we have a long way to go. I know I hurt you and your mother in ways I can never fully make right." He swallowed hard. "But I want to try, if you'll let me." Tasha looked at this man, her father, broken by betrayal but somehow standing straighter than he had in years. The anger she had carried for so long felt lighter now, less defining. "One step at a time, Dad," she said. "Today was a good first step." As they parted ways on the sunny street corner, neither knew exactly what their relationship would become. But for the first time in 5 years, both father and daughter walked away with something that had been missing for too long: hope.